The voicemail came at 6:47 in the morning, and I know the exact time because I had not slept. My name is Céleste. I was 31 years old that October, and I had built something from nothing, which is a thing people say so often it stops meaning anything until you are the one who actually did it. I started my landscape architecture firm out of a rented desk in a co-working space in Raleigh when I was 26. By 31, I had 8 employees, 2 commercial contracts with developers in the Research Triangle, and a reputation for doing work that was both beautiful and on time. The firm was mine in the way that things are yours when you have paid for them in years, not money. My brother Callum was 35. My mother had been managing the firm's administrative accounts for 14 months. I want to be precise about that because precision matters when you are trying to explain how something like this happens. My mother did not steal from me in the way you picture when you hear the word theft. She did not take a lump sum and disappear. She did it the way water damages a foundation, slowly, in small amounts, in places you are not looking because you trust the structure. The voicemail was from my brother. His voice was careful in the way voices get when someone is rehearsed. He said that he and my mother needed to speak with me about a family matter. He said it was time-sensitive. He said he hoped I would come to Sunday dinner. I stood in my kitchen in the gray October morning and listened to it twice. The phrase family matter landed in my chest the way it always does when someone uses formal language to soften something informal. I called back and got his voicemail. I texted my mother and got a single word back. Sunday. I want to tell you about my friend Petra, because she is important to this story, and because I would not have gotten through it without her. Petra Gaines had been my best friend since our second year of college, when we ended up as partners on a studio project that neither of us wanted to do, and both of us ended up caring about too much. She was a CBA now, worked for a mid-sized firm downtown, the kind of person who notices numbers the way other people notice faces. She had a quality I have always admired, which is that she could be completely warm and completely precise at the same time. She did not pick one. I called her that Saturday morning and told her about the voicemail. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Before you go to that dinner, let me look at something." I had given Petra access to my bookkeeping software 8 months earlier when I was overwhelmed during a contract expansion and needed someone to help me organize my vendor records for tax season. She had helped me for 2 weeks and then stepped back, but the access was still there. What she found over the following 6 hours changed the shape of everything I thought I understood. I need to back up a little because context matters. 14 months before that October, I had offered my mother the opportunity to handle administrative operations for the firm, scheduling, vendor payments, expense approvals, basic financial correspondence. My office manager at the time had left for a position in Charlotte and I was in the middle of 2 large projects and did not have time to hire carefully. My mother had worked in medical office administration for 20 years and knew how to run an organized back office. The arrangement felt natural. It felt like trust. That is the word I kept coming back to later, how natural it had felt, because I think that naturalness was the thing that made it possible for so long. The revenue numbers had not alarmed me because I had attributed the softness in our margins to the expansion costs. When you are growing, things cost more. That is what I told myself. What Petra found was not a softening of margins. It was a series of payments, modest individually, that over 14 months added up to something that was not modest at all. There was a landscaping equipment supplier with an address that resolved to a vacant commercial unit in Cary. There was a recurring maintenance services invoice from a company whose state registration had lapsed 2 years prior. There were 3 vendor accounts that had been created in the system with email addresses that, when you looked at them carefully, used domain names registered within the same 30-day window. My mother had the authorization credentials to approve payments up to a certain threshold without requiring my sign-off. Every single payment fell just below that threshold. Petra called me at 4 in the afternoon. She said, "Céleste, I need you to come to my apartment. Bring your laptop. Bring a coat because I'm gonna need to walk around the block a few times while I explain this to you and I cannot do it sitting still." I drove to her place and she walked me through it at her kitchen table with 2 printed spreadsheets and a yellow legal pad and the particular calm she has when she is very certain of something and also very unhappy about it. She had cross-referenced the payment dates against my mother's calendar access logs and the approval timestamps. The pattern was systematic. It was not a mistake, and it was not a mistentation, and it was not a systems error. I asked where the money had gone. Petra turned the legal pad over and showed me the second page. She had done some additional research while I was driving over. My brother Callum had declared bankruptcy 3 years ago, a fact I knew. What I had not known was that the debt he had discharged officially was not the full picture. There were informal obligations, the kind that do not show up in bankruptcy filings because they are not owed to institutions. He had borrowed money from 2 people and had been making what appeared to be regular payments to them for the last 14 months. The timing aligned. My mother had decided, without asking me, without telling me, that my firm was an appropriate vehicle for her son's financial survival. Petra kept her hand on my arm the entire time she explained this. She said, "I know what you want to do right now. Don't do it yet." What I wanted to do was call my mother. Instead, I drove home and sat in my car in the parking deck for 22 minutes doing nothing. Then I went upstairs and made a list. I am a person who makes lists. It is not a charming quirk. It is the way I hold myself together when the alternative is falling apart. And that night, the list was the only thing keeping me on the right side of a very thin line. The items on the list were not dramatic. They were methodical. Document everything. Do not alter access permissions. Do not alert anyone to the review. Contact a forensic accountant on Monday morning. Speak to a business attorney. Go to Sunday dinner. I went to Sunday dinner. My mother's house smelled like pot roast and the candles she lights every Sunday regardless of the occasion. Callum was already there when I arrived, seated at the kitchen table with a glass of water, wearing the expression of someone who has rehearsed. My mother came out of the kitchen with oven mitts on her hands and her warmest voice and kissed me on the cheek and asked about my drive. We sat at the table and ate, and the conversation was ordinary in the specific way of conversations that are not ordinary at all. I watched my brother cut his food. I watched my mother refill his water without being asked. I ate the pot roast and said please and thank you, and asked about my aunt's hip surgery and answered questions about my current projects. After dinner, my mother put decaf on and set the creamer on the table and said, "There's something we wanted to talk to you about." Callum cleared his throat. He said there was an opportunity, a chance for the firm to expand in a new direction. He had connected with a contractor in Greensboro who was looking for a landscape architecture partnership on a large residential development. The numbers were significant, the timeline was tight. What they needed from me was a capital commitment, operating funds, seed money to secure the contract. He slid a piece of paper across the table with a number on it. I looked at the number. I looked at my brother. I looked at my mother. The number was not random. I understood that immediately. It was almost exactly the aggregate of what had been taken over 14 months, as though replenishing what they had removed would somehow make the taking not have happened. I asked one question. I asked what firm was the contractor registered under. My brother said a name I did not recognize. I asked if he had a business registration number. The temperature in the room changed in the particular way rooms change when the thing everyone is agreed not to say becomes unsayable in a different direction. My mother said my name in a tone that was not warm anymore. Callum put his hands flat on the table. I said I would need to review the proposal in more detail before making any commitments. I said I appreciated them bringing it to me. I folded the paper and put it in my coat pocket. I thanked my mother for dinner. I drove home with both hands on the wheel at exactly the speed limit and did not stop until I was in my own kitchen. I called Petra and told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay. Let's do this right." The following 2 weeks were the most methodical 2 weeks of my life. Petra referred me to a forensic accountant she trusted, a woman named Dr. Ewan who worked out of an office in Durham and had the quality of someone who had seen everything and was no longer capable of being surprised by anything. Dr. Ewan spent 5 days reviewing the accounts. When she presented her findings, she did it with a printed report and a table of contents and section dividers. The way you present findings when you want them to be unambiguous. The documentation was complete. The trail was clear. Every fictitious vendor, every routed payment, every approval timestamp was accounted for. I met with a business attorney the same week. Her name was Ms. Farrow. She was not warm, which was what I needed. She was precise and she was thorough, and she told me what my options were without telling me what to feel about them. She said the civil claim was solid. She said the documentation Dr. Ewan had compiled would hold up. She said I should think carefully about what I wanted the outcome to be, not just legally, but personally. Because those two things were sometimes not the same thing, and the gap between them could cost you more than the money did. I thought about it for 4 days. The annual client appreciation dinner for the firm was 3 weeks out. I held it every October at a restored event space in downtown Raleigh, a full evening for our clients, our contractors, our design partners. 60 people, the kind of event where I stood at a podium and talked about the work we had done together, and the work we were planning to do. It was the most visible moment of my professional year. I called my mother and told her I had reviewed Callum's proposal, and I wanted to give it serious consideration. I told her I'd had some concerns initially, but that I thought there might be something there worth exploring. I told her I wanted the whole family involved, that I wanted her and Callum to come to the client dinner as my guests, that I was going to make an announcement that evening about the firm's next chapter and I wanted them there. Her voice changed while I was still talking. By the end of the call, she was telling me I had always known how to bring people together. That was something she had always said about me. I sat with that for a while after I hung up. The night of the dinner, my mother wore a green dress I had seen before and Callum wore a jacket that was newer than his usual clothes. They arrived together and moved through the room with the ease of people who believe they are about to receive something. My mother introduced herself to 2 of my commercial clients as someone deeply involved in the firm's operations. Callum shook hands with my project lead and told him the firm had an exciting direction ahead. I watched from across the room and felt something I can only describe as a kind of stillness. Not calm exactly. The stillness of something that has already been decided. I took the podium at 8 o'clock. I thanked everyone for coming. I talked briefly about the past year's work, a restored waterfront park in Chapel Hill, a residential community garden project in Carborough, a green infrastructure consultation we had completed for a municipal client. I said I wanted to share something about what it meant to build something, what it actually meant, not in the version of the story you tell at podiums, but in the version you live through. Then I nodded to my office manager and the display screen on the wall behind me came to life. What was on that screen was not complicated. It did not need to be complicated to be devastating. It was a clean table of fictitious vendor names, their registration addresses, their payment amounts, their approval dates, and the aggregate total. It was a timeline. It was a routing summary. Dr. Turdicated. Ewan had formatted it the way forensic accountants format things, which is to say, without ambiguity. I did not look at my mother or my brother while the slide was on the screen. I did not need to. The room told me everything about how they looked. The quality of silence that arrived in those first few seconds was the kind that means everyone in the room understands what they are looking at. I said, "This firm exists because I built it. Every contract, every client relationship, every hour of work that made this evening possible. I am grateful to the people in this room who have trusted us with their projects, and I want them to know that I will always protect what we have built together." I stepped away from the podium. What happened after that is something I will not reconstruct in its entirety because some parts of it belong to me and not to anyone else. My mother stood up very quickly. She looked at the screen, and then she looked at me, and she said my name in a tone I had never heard from her before. Callum put his glass down and his face went through several expressions before it settled on one I recognized as calculation. The particular look of someone deciding what move comes next. They left through the side exit, not together, separately, with the particular posture of people who are no longer coordinating. The room held its silence for a moment, and then the sound of conversation slowly came back, careful at first, and then more normal, the way rooms recover from unexpected things. Petra found me near the bar 20 minutes later. She handed me a glass of water and stood next to me without saying anything for a while, which is the correct thing to do and not everyone knows how to do it. The legal process took 3 months and 2 weeks. Miss Farrow filed the civil complaint and handled the correspondence with their attorneys with a thoroughness I was grateful for and did not have to manage myself. Dr. Ewan provided a supplemental affidavit. The settlement was reached without going to trial. The recoverable funds were recovered. The terms required that my mother's administrative access to the firm's systems be permanently revoked, and that neither she nor Callum could enter into any financial arrangement with the firm in any capacity. Callum sent an email 6 weeks after the dinner. It was long and it moved through several different registers, regret and justification in something that approached an explanation without quite arriving at one. I read it once. I did not respond. My mother called from a number I did not recognize 3 times in the week after the settlement was finalized. I did not answer. I had sent a single written message through Miss Farrow's office stating that I wished everyone well and would not be available for contact. There is a thing I did for myself in January that I want to tell you about, because it feels important in a way I am still figuring out how to articulate. I rearranged my office. That is a small thing. I know it is a small thing. But my mother had chosen the layout of that office when she came in to set up the administrative systems. She had opinions about where the filing cabinet should go, and where the plant should be, and what the client-facing side of the desk should look like. I had let her because it seemed like a kind of welcome, and because I was busy, and because I thought it did not matter. In January, I moved everything. The desk faces the window now. The filing cabinet is in a different corner. The plant is by the door, which gets better light. It is not decorated the way she would have decorated it. It is decorated the way I would, which I am still in the process of learning, because there are things you stop asking yourself when you have always had someone else's answer available. I have been thinking, in the months since, about what it means to build something and not know who you built it for. I spent 5 years growing this firm, and I think for a significant portion of those 5 years, I was growing it toward a version of success that someone else had defined for me. Not consciously, not with any kind of plan, but the way a plant grows toward the available light regardless of whether that light is where you actually want it to go. My brother was not a villain in any cinematic sense. My mother was not calculating in the way people imagine when they hear words like fraud and scheme and fictitious vendor. They were people who had decided at some point before I started paying attention that my stability was a resource and my success was a fund, and my trust was a door that would stay open if they were careful about how often they used it. The accounting irregularities were the last item in a much longer record. The record started long before the firm did. I am not done being angry about it. I want to be honest about that. There are mornings when I come into the office and see the desk facing the window and feel something that is not quite peace yet but is oriented in that direction. There are other mornings when the anger is very clean and specific, and I let it be there because pretending it is not the same as healing. Petra comes by on Fridays now. We eat lunch in the conference room and talk about the work, and sometimes we do not talk about anything in particular, and that is its own kind of thing. Last month I hired a new office manager. Her name is Odette. She is 28 and very organized, and she does not have any opinions about where the filing cabinet should go, which is something I did not know I needed until I had it. I've been thinking about a question I want to ask you, not rhetorically, not as a way of ending a story neatly, but because I am genuinely still sitting with it. If you have ever been trusted by someone, and used that trust as a door that swings both ways, not maliciously, not with a plan, but because the door was open and the need was there, did you know you were doing it? And if you have ever been the person with the open door, the one who kept it unlocked because you wanted to believe that unlocking it was the same as being loved, what was the moment you understood the difference? I am 31 years old. I built something from nothing. I am still learning what nothing and something actually mean, and I think that is going to take longer than the building did. I have been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately, not in any grand philosophical way, just in the quiet, practical way you think about things when you are sitting at a desk that finally faces the right window. What happened to me did not begin with fictitious vendors or routing logs or a number written on a folded piece of paper slid across a dinner table. It began much earlier than that, in all the small moments where I chose trust over observation, warmth over accuracy, the feeling of being loved over the evidence of whether I actually was. That is not a character flaw. It is something most people do, especially with family. especially when the person taking from you is someone who also made you lunch and drove you to school and knows exactly which version of your name to use when they want you to soften. But here is what I understand now that I did not understand then. Trust is not the same as love. And love is not the same as loyalty. And loyalty is not the same as being treated like a person rather than a resource. Those are four different things, and collapsing them together is where the damage starts. Callum did not hate me. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters. He was someone who needed something and saw a door that appeared to be open and walked through it, and then kept walking through it for 14 months because no one closed it. My mother made a choice that I think she convinced herself was pragmatic, even generous in its own logic. Here is a daughter who has built something stable. Here is a son who is drowning. Here is an access credential and a payment threshold and a problem that can be quietly solved. The logic held together if you did not look too carefully at what it required me not to know. What Petra gave me was not just a spreadsheet. It was the ability to see clearly before I acted, which is the only sequence that actually works. If I'd walked into that Sunday dinner with nothing but my anger, I would have handed them the narrative. I would have been the unstable one, the accusatory one. The daughter who made a scene over a misunderstanding. Intelligence, real, careful, documented intelligence, is what turns a wound into a record. That is what Dr. Ewan's report was. That is what the display screen at the dinner was. Not a performance, a record. What I keep coming back to, though, is the question of character. Not theirs, mine. The question of who I was in the process of becoming during those 3 months between Petra's call and the evening of the dinner. Because I could have let it make me cruel, and I chose not to. I was precise, I was patient, I was thorough. I protected the firm and the people who depended on it, and I did it without becoming someone I would not recognize later. That matters to me more than the money that was recovered. The desk faces the window now. Odette has strong opinions about the coffee situation, and no opinions at all about the filing cabinet, and I am learning, slowly, that a workplace built around your own preferences feels different in the morning than one built around someone else's idea of what you should want. I am still 31. I am still learning what I built and who I built it for. But I know now that the answer to that question has to be mine, because the moment you let someone else hold that answer for you, you have handed them something far more valuable than access credentials. You have handed them the door.